I am Eleanor, 68 years old, living with my daughter Rebecca after selling my home 2 years ago. What started as a comfortable arrangement slowly turned into my worst nightmare. This morning at breakfast, Rebecca delivered an ultimatum. Hand over my pension card or she would send me back to my hometown. I shocked her when I smiled, walked upstairs, packed my suitcase, and informed her I was stopping the mortgage payments. If you've ever faced family betrayal, give this video a like and subscribe to join our community of survivors standing against financial abuse. Looking back, I still remember the pride I felt on my last day at Oak Ridge High School. After 35 years of teaching English literature, my classroom walls were lined with farewell cards from students past and present. Teaching had never made me wealthy, but watching young minds discover the magic in Shakespeare or find themselves in Maya Angelou's words had given me a richness money couldn't buy. I retired 5 years ago with a modest pension that reflected my years of service to public education. My husband Gerald and I had built our life together with careful planning. We met at a mutual friend's barbecue when we were both 23, and married within a year. Gerald worked as an accountant for a local manufacturing company, bringing steady income while I pursued my passion for teaching. He was meticulous with our finances, tracking every expense in his leather-bound ledger long after digital spreadsheets became the norm. "Old habits," he would say with that gentle smile that always made my heart flutter. Even after 4 decades together, we lived frugally but comfortably. Our 3-bedroom ranch-style home in Mapleton wasn't extravagant, but we'd paid off the mortgage 10 years before retirement. Our biggest splurge had been annual road trips across America during summer breaks, visiting national parks and historic landmarks with our daughter Rebecca. Gerald insisted on setting aside 15% of our income for retirement, regardless of other expenses. "Future Eleanor and Gerald will thank us," he'd say. And they did. When Gerald clutched his chest and collapsed in our garden 3 years ago, the paramedics arrived quickly but couldn't save him. His heart attack was sudden and massive. At 65, I found myself alone for the first time since my early 20s. The grief was overwhelming, but I forced myself to continue the practical financial habits Gerald had instilled in us. My teacher's pension provided about $3,200 monthly, and we had nearly $120,000 in savings. Our home was fully paid for, giving me security despite my loss. However, as the second year without Gerald progressed, I noticed the maintenance issues he had always handled were becoming increasingly difficult and expensive. The water heater failed during a cold December week, costing $1,200 to replace. The aging roof developed a leak after spring storms. The backyard Gerald had lovingly maintained grew increasingly unmanageable for me alone. Each repair drained my savings a little more, creating anxiety about my financial future. During a Sunday dinner at Rebecca's home, as I mentioned the latest plumbing issue, my daughter suggested what seemed like the perfect solution. "Mom, why don't you sell the house and move in with us?" Rebecca said, reaching for my hand across her dining table. "We have that guest suite downstairs with its own bathroom. You wouldn't have to worry about maintenance anymore." Her husband Anthony nodded encouragingly. It would be great for Mason and Lily to have more time with their grandmother. At 12 and 9, my grandchildren were at wonderful ages, curious and affectionate. Mason had inherited my love of books, while Lily showed artistic talent that reminded me of Gerald's sister Judith. "We could use the money from your house sale as a down payment on a bigger place," Rebecca continued. "Something with more space for everyone. You could contribute to the mortgage instead of throwing money away on repairs for that old house." The suggestion made practical sense. My 3-bedroom home had become unnecessarily large for just me, and the emotional weight of Gerald's absence lingered in every room. After several weeks of consideration and conversations with my financial advisor, I agreed to the arrangement. My home sold quickly for $375,000 in the competitive market. After settling costs, I gave Rebecca $75,000 for the down payment on a 2-story colonial in Lakewood Heights, an upscale neighborhood with excellent schools for the children. We agreed I would contribute $1,000 monthly toward the mortgage, leaving me enough from my pension for personal expenses and to continue building my savings. The first few months of our new living arrangement exceeded my expectations. Anthony installed handrails in my bathroom and a comfortable reading chair by the window in my bedroom. Rebecca consulted me about meal planning, and we enjoyed cooking together in her spacious kitchen. The children would often complete their homework at my small desk, allowing me to help with English assignments and history projects. Family game nights became a Friday tradition, with Mason teaching me card games while Lily and I created elaborate stories using her stuffed animals as characters. Anthony, who worked as a software engineer, showed remarkable patience explaining technology to me, helping set up video calls with my sister Mildred in Arizona. My contributions to the household extended beyond financial. I drove the children to after-school activities when Rebecca worked late at her marketing firm. I tended the small vegetable garden Anthony had started but rarely had time to maintain. During school breaks, I took the children to museums and libraries, relieving Rebecca and Anthony of childcare concerns. For those first 6 months, I believed I had made the perfect decision. Living with my daughter's family brought warmth and purpose back into my daily life, after the loneliness that followed Gerald's death. The arrangement seemed beneficial for everyone involved, creating a multi-generational household where resources and responsibilities were shared. I felt grateful for my daughter's invitation and optimistic about our future together. I had no way of knowing that the comfortable family dynamic I was experiencing would gradually transform into something unrecognizable and painful. Had I seen what was coming, I might have kept my little ranch house with all its maintenance problems and preserved my independence. But hindsight offers clarity that foresight rarely provides, and I stepped willingly into what would become the most challenging chapter of my senior years. The changes were so gradual, I barely noticed them at first. Little comments from Rebecca about my old-fashioned cooking when I prepared Gerald's beef stew recipe. Subtle sighs when I mentioned memories from my teaching days. Questions about why I needed so many books taking up space in my room. None of these moments seemed significant in isolation, but together they formed a pattern I was reluctant to acknowledge. Around the 6-month mark, Rebecca's tone shifted more noticeably. One evening when I was watching Jeopardy in the living room, she entered with a tight expression. "Mom, could you use headphones when you watch TV? The noise carries upstairs and disturbs everyone. Anthony needs concentration for his work, and the kids need quiet for studying." It was only 7:30 p.m., and the volume was already low, but I nodded and purchased wireless headphones the next day. I didn't want to be a burden. Soon after, I noticed several of my framed photos had been removed from the hallway and placed in a box in my room. When I questioned Rebecca, she explained they were cluttering the space and didn't match her decorating aesthetic. My collection of ceramic birds that had once brightened the living room bookshelf was similarly relocated to my increasingly crowded bedroom. "It's just that we're trying to maintain a certain look in the common areas," Rebecca explained when I expressed disappointment. "The house has to function for everyone, not just as your personal museum." The word museum stung with its implication that my belongings were relics, not meaningful parts of a shared home. Still, I rationalized that it was her house and her right to decorate as she wished. Practical changes to my living situation continued accumulating. My access to the kitchen became tacitly restricted when Rebecca complained about my early morning coffee disturbing her sleep, despite my bedroom being on a different floor. My evening tea preparation similarly received commentary about messes left for others to clean, though I was meticulous about tidying up after myself. The children's time with me diminished as Rebecca scheduled increasingly structured activities for them. Mason's weekend reading sessions with me were replaced with SAT prep courses, despite him being years away from college applications. Lily's art afternoons gave way to competitive gymnastics training. "They need to focus on their futures," Rebecca insisted when I gently suggested the children seemed overscheduled. "They can visit with you during dinner." But even dinner conversations became strained as Rebecca frequently interrupted my stories or redirected discussions away from topics I introduced. The children grew quieter around me, looking to their mother before responding to my questions. My bedroom, once a comfortable sanctuary, gradually became a storage space for seasonal decorations, exercise equipment Rebecca purchased but rarely used, and boxes of business documents Anthony couldn't fit in his office. My personal space shrank as these intrusions multiplied. The financial exploitation began subtly. Rebecca borrowed $20 for the children's school fundraiser, then $50 for a gift for Anthony's birthday. These loans were never repaid, despite my careful notations in my expense journal. When I gently reminded her about repayment, she looked surprised. "I thought that was your contribution to the family, Mom. You're living here basically rent-free compared to what assisted living would cost." This characterization shocked me, given my substantial down payment contribution and monthly mortgage payments, not to mention my unpaid labor in childcare and household management. But I swallowed my objections, not wanting to create conflict. The questions about my finances grew more frequent and direct. Rebecca asked about my pension amount, my bank balances, and whether I had updated my will since Gerald's death. She suggested I should contribute more to household expenses, citing rising grocery costs and utilities. "It's only fair since you're using everything we provide," she said during one particularly uncomfortable conversation. "Plus, Anthony and I need to save for the children's college funds." I began tracking our grocery spending and noticed Rebecca was purchasing expensive organic specialty items that hadn't been part of our diet before, seemingly to justify the increased contribution she requested. My monthly household contribution gradually increased from $1,000 to $1,800, leaving me with less discretionary income and limiting my ability to save. After a particularly difficult week of subtle criticisms and financial pressure, I attempted to address the situation with Anthony privately. I caught him alone in the garage one Saturday morning while he organized his tools. "Anthony, I'm concerned about some changes in the household dynamics," I began carefully. "I feel like my space and role in the family are shrinking, and the financial arrangements seem to be shifting from our original agreement." He looked uncomfortable, glancing toward the door as if worried Rebecca might appear. "Eleanor, I understand your concerns, but Rebecca is under a lot of pressure at work. She's doing her best to balance everyone's needs. Maybe give it some time." His sympathetic tone suggested he recognized the issues but wasn't willing to confront them. I realized he would remain passive in whatever situation developed between Rebecca and me. My attempt at a heart-to-heart conversation with Rebecca went poorly. She immediately became defensive, accusing me of being ungrateful for everything they had done for me. "We gave up our privacy and changed our whole lives to accommodate you, Mom," she said, voice rising. "And now you're complaining? Do you know how many seniors would be grateful for this arrangement instead of being alone?" When I suggested family counseling might help us communicate better, Rebecca reacted with anger. "We don't need some stranger telling us how to run our family. If you're unhappy here, maybe we need to reconsider this arrangement entirely." The threat was clear, and I retreated, apologizing for raising concerns. That night, I created a folder where I began documenting financial transactions, conversations, and changes to our living arrangement. Something in Rebecca's reaction made me feel I might need this evidence eventually. As weeks passed into months, I found myself increasingly isolated and anxious. Sleep became difficult as I reviewed interactions with Rebecca, questioning whether I was being overly sensitive or if the situation was genuinely problematic. I missed Gerald terribly during this time, knowing he would have seen through any manipulation and helped me navigate these troubled waters. I began spending more time in my increasingly cluttered bedroom, avoiding interactions that might trigger Rebecca's criticism. The grandchildren seemed to sense the tension, becoming more formal and less spontaneous in their interactions with me. I watched helplessly as the warm family dynamic I had cherished slowly disintegrated, replaced by an atmosphere of walking on eggshells. In quiet moments alone, I questioned my decision to sell my home. The independence I had sacrificed for family closeness now seemed a steep price as that closeness revealed itself to be conditional and fragile. But with no home to return to and my savings significantly reduced by my contribution to Rebecca's mortgage, my options seemed limited. I felt trapped in a situation that was gradually draining my financial resources and my emotional well-being. My 68th birthday arrived on a crisp October morning. I awoke early, allowing myself a moment of reflection on the previous year's celebration, when Anthony had prepared a special breakfast, and the children had presented handmade cards. Gerald and I had always made birthdays special occasions, regardless of our budget constraints, and I had continued this tradition with Rebecca's family. I dressed carefully in a blue blouse Gerald had given me for our last anniversary together, applied light makeup, and went downstairs expecting at least acknowledgement of the day. Instead, I found the kitchen empty except for a note on the counter. Taking kids to school early for science project. Leftovers in fridge for your lunch. No mention of my birthday. No card. No acknowledgement of the day's significance. I made my coffee in silence, telling myself perhaps they planned a surprise for dinner. But evening came and Rebecca announced they were going to Mason's basketball game, something she hadn't mentioned previously. They left me with another container of leftovers and returned late, everyone immediately heading to bed with barely a good night. My birthday had passed completely unacknowledged by my only family. Lying in bed that night, I realized this wasn't an oversight but a deliberate message about my diminishing importance in their lives. 2 weeks later, I returned from a doctor's appointment to find myself locked out of the house. I knocked repeatedly, then called Rebecca's cell phone, which went to voicemail. After 30 minutes sitting on the porch in increasingly cold weather, a car pulled into the driveway. Rebecca emerged looking surprised to see me. "Oh, I forgot you had an appointment today," she said, unlocking the door. "We're having a dinner party for Anthony's work colleagues tonight. Could you stay in your room? We need to use the dining and living areas." Inside, I discovered the house transformed with elegant decorations and catering setup. As I moved toward my bedroom, Rebecca added, "And please use the bathroom downstairs only. The guests will be using the main bathrooms." I spent that evening confined to my bedroom while laughter and conversation flowed through the house. No invitation to join, not even a plate of food offered. I felt like an inconvenient tenant rather than a family member. The following month brought another painful incident. Returning from grocery shopping, I discovered my collection of vintage handkerchiefs missing from my dresser drawer. These delicate fabrics had been passed down from my grandmother, each with unique embroidery representing significant family events. When I questioned Rebecca, her response was casual. "Oh, those old things? I cleared them out during spring cleaning. They were collecting dust and probably full of allergens." "But they were family heirlooms," I protested, my voice shaking. "They weren't yours to throw away." Rebecca rolled her eyes. "Mom, they were just old rags. We don't have space for every sentimental item you want to keep. You need to start downsizing your possessions." No apology. No recognition of what those handkerchiefs represented. I later discovered she hadn't actually discarded them, but had given the collection to her friend Vanessa, who collected vintage textiles. The deliberate cruelty of this act marked a new phase in our deteriorating relationship. The grandchildren, once so affectionate and engaged with me, grew increasingly distant. Lily no longer asked me to read bedtime stories, and Mason stopped sharing details about his school projects. When I attempted to connect with them, their responses were polite but brief, their eyes darting to Rebecca as if seeking approval for interacting with me. Mom says we shouldn't bother you too much because old people need more rest," Lily informed me when I invited her to bake cookies one afternoon. The painful words were delivered with innocent concern, making clear Rebecca was actively reshaping my relationship with the children. My suspicions about Rebecca's intentions crystallized one afternoon when I overheard her phone conversation while she thought I was napping. She was speaking with her friend Vanessa in the backyard, her voice carrying through my partially open window. "Mom's pension is actually pretty decent for a teacher," Rebecca was saying. "Plus, she's got some savings left. I'm working on convincing her to contribute more toward the house since property taxes increased. She doesn't need spending money at her age." Vanessa's response was inaudible, but Rebecca continued, "Well, eventually we'll need to figure out the best approach for her retirement accounts. Anthony thinks we should suggest adding our names since we're providing her housing and care." The conversation confirmed my worst fears. My daughter viewed me primarily as a financial resource to be managed and exploited. The realization was devastating but clarifying. My suspicions prompted me to check my personal files, kept in a small filing cabinet in my bedroom. I discovered several documents missing, including recent retirement account statements. After a careful search of the house while everyone was out, I found them in Rebecca's desk drawer, along with several of my unopened mail items. More alarming was discovering my laptop browser history showed attempts to access my online banking, despite me never using the computer for financial management. Someone had been trying to access my accounts using incorrect passwords, triggering security alerts I had dismissed as routine bank communications. These discoveries galvanized me into quiet resistance. The following week, I visited a different bank branch across town and opened a new account, transferring a portion of my savings there. I contacted my pension administrator to ensure all security measures were updated and confirmed no changes could be made without my in-person verification. I reached out to my old friend Martha from the teaching days, explaining my situation in carefully measured terms. Martha offered to store important documents and family heirlooms in her home, an offer I gratefully accepted. Over several weeks, I gradually transferred irreplaceable items to her safekeeping during our lunch dates. While Rebecca believed I was simply socializing, I was actually researching senior housing options, consulting with a financial advisor recommended by Martha, and rebuilding a support network independent of my daughter's family. I reconnected with former colleagues through phone calls made while Rebecca was at work, careful to delete the call history afterward. As I established these safeguards, Rebecca's behavior worsened. When we were alone, her tone became openly contemptuous. "You know, Mom, most people your age are in nursing homes, not living in luxury with private space in their daughter's home," she commented one morning. "You should be more appreciative of everything we do for you." When I mentioned visiting my grandniece's piano recital, Rebecca immediately objected. "I don't think that's a good idea. Long drives aren't safe for someone your age. Besides, the kids need you here to help with their science projects." The children's science projects never materialized, but my opportunity to connect with extended family was effectively blocked. Rebecca's control extended to monitoring my phone calls, often finding reasons to linger nearby when I spoke with friends or entering my room unexpectedly during conversations. Most disturbing was discovering Rebecca had been speaking negatively about me to extended family members. My sister Mildred called one evening concerned. "Eleanor, Rebecca told me you've been having memory problems and getting confused about money," she said hesitantly. "She mentioned you accused her of taking things that you actually lost. Is everything okay?" The systematic campaign to isolate me and undermine my credibility to others became increasingly apparent. Rebecca was laying groundwork to justify whatever financial control she planned to establish over me. I reassured Mildred I was perfectly lucid while being careful not to explicitly contradict Rebecca's claims, knowing it might escalate the situation before I was prepared to address it. As tensions increased at home, I found small ways to maintain my dignity and independence. I established a regular coffee meeting with a seniors group at the local library, giving me legitimate reason to leave the house regularly. I downloaded banking apps on my phone, which Rebecca seemed to consider less important to monitor than my laptop. I began carrying essential documents in a secure pouch beneath my clothing when I left the house, no longer trusting the privacy of my bedroom. Each night, as I documented the days concerning incidents in a journal hidden beneath my mattress, I contemplated how my relationship with my daughter had deteriorated to this point. I thought of the little girl who had once made me handprint Mother's Day cards, and the teenager who had defended me fiercely when a store clerk was rude. Somewhere along the way, that loving daughter had transformed into someone who viewed me as a financial resource rather than a person deserving of dignity and respect. The situation was becoming increasingly untenable, but I needed time to secure my finances and establish alternatives before confronting the reality of my circumstances. Little did I know that Rebecca's patience was wearing thin as well, and the breaking point was approaching faster than I had anticipated. The pivotal morning began like many others in recent months. I prepared a simple breakfast of toast and fruit while Rebecca organized school lunches for the children. Anthony sat at the kitchen island, scrolling through news on his tablet, occasionally commenting on headlines. Mason and Lily ate quickly, eager to finish homework before the school bus arrived. The superficial normality shattered when Rebecca casually announced, "We've finalized plans for our summer vacation to Yellowstone. 2 weeks in July, just after Independence Day." "That sounds wonderful," I replied, genuinely happy for the children's opportunity to experience the national park Gerald and I had loved. The wildlife viewing is spectacular there. I still remember when we saw that grizzly with cubs near the lake. Rebecca exchanged a glance with Anthony before continuing. "It's going to be just the four of us. Family bonding time." The implication hung in the air. I wasn't included in family for this purpose. Anthony suddenly became intensely interested in his coffee cup, avoiding eye contact. I see, I said carefully, conscious of the children's presence. Will I be staying with Martha while you're away? Rebecca's laugh held no warmth. Mom, you're perfectly capable of staying by yourself for 2 weeks. You keep insisting you don't need supervision. Mason looked up, brow furrowed. But Grandma could help spot animals. She knows all about Yellowstone. Finish your breakfast, Mason, Rebecca said sharply. The bus will be here soon. After the children left, Rebecca brought up the household finances, a topic that had become increasingly contentious. The property taxes have gone up again. And with inflation affecting groceries, our monthly expenses are really stretching our budget. Anthony nodded in agreement, though his expression remained uncomfortable. My company delayed bonuses this quarter, so things are tight. I'm already contributing $1,800 monthly, I pointed out. That's almost 60% of my pension, plus the down payment I provided. About that, Rebecca said, setting down her coffee cup with deliberate care. We need to discuss a more sustainable arrangement for everyone. Anthony glanced at his watch. I should get going. Early meeting today. He kissed Rebecca's cheek and hurried out, clearly avoiding the impending confrontation. Once we were alone, Rebecca's demeanor changed completely. The polite facade dropped, revealing the calculation beneath. Let's be honest, Mom. You're living here essentially cost-free compared to what you'd pay at a senior facility. We provide your housing, food, utilities, transportation, and basically your entire quality of life. Meanwhile, Anthony and I are working ourselves to exhaustion trying to save for the children's college and our own retirement. I remained silent, sensing this rehearsed speech had been long in preparation. The reality is, your contribution isn't covering your actual costs to this household. The financial burden is falling on us, not to mention the sacrifice of our privacy and freedom. Do you know how many vacations we've postponed because of accommodating your needs? I wasn't aware my presence was preventing your vacations, I said quietly. You've never mentioned that before. Rebecca continued as if I hadn't spoken. We've been patient, hoping you'd recognize the situation and offer more support voluntarily. But it's become clear we need to formalize our arrangement. She pulled a folder from her purse and placed it on the table between us. I've calculated the market rate for senior living in this area. Even basic facilities start at $4,000 monthly for far less private space than you have here. What we're proposing is simple and fair. She opened the folder to reveal a document titled Family Care Agreement. My stomach tightened as I scanned the content, which essentially granted Rebecca control over my pension and remaining savings in exchange for continued housing in their home. This protects everyone, Rebecca explained, her tone businesslike. You'll have guaranteed care for life, and we'll have compensation for providing it. All we need is your pension card and online banking access. I'll manage all the financial details so you won't have to worry about it. When I didn't immediately respond, her expression hardened. If this arrangement doesn't work for you, we can certainly explore alternatives. There are several retirement facilities back in your hometown that accept Medicare patients. I've researched a few options already. The threat was unmistakable. Either sign over control of my finances, or be sent away to a facility far from my grandchildren and support network. She had strategically waited until I had given up my home, and depleted much of my savings before revealing her true intentions. As I sat there, a memory surfaced with sudden clarity. Gerald and I had been discussing Rebecca's expensive tastes during her college years. She sees money as a tool to get what she wants, Gerald had observed with unusual seriousness. Be careful about financial entanglements with her, Eleanor. I worry about how she might handle things if I'm not around someday. I had dismissed his concerns then, attributing them to generational differences in attitudes toward spending. Now I recognized the prescience in his warning. This had likely been Rebecca's plan from the beginning, to gain control of my assets under the guise of family care. Mentally, I calculated all I had contributed. The $75,000 down payment. Approximately $36,000 in mortgage payments over 2 years. Countless hours of childcare, cooking and household management. My contributions had significantly reduced their housing costs and childcare expenses, while simultaneously diminishing my own financial security. As Rebecca waited for my response, something shifted inside me. The fear and uncertainty that had characterized recent months crystallized into clarity and resolve. I wouldn't continue sacrificing my dignity and financial independence to someone who viewed me as a resource rather than a person. "I need some time to think about this," I said finally, keeping my voice steady despite the emotion churning inside. "It's a significant decision." Rebecca seemed surprised by my calm response but nodded. "Take today to review everything. We can sign the papers tomorrow morning. I've already contacted my lawyer to make it official." She left for work shortly after, confident in her position of power. She didn't realize that her ultimatum had inadvertently given me exactly what I needed: certainty about her intentions and motivation to take decisive action. That evening, I pleaded a headache and retired to my room early, declining dinner with the family. Once alone, I made several important phone calls, confirming arrangements I had been quietly preparing. I wrote a heartfelt letter to Mason and Lily, explaining my departure in terms they could understand without vilifying their mother. I carefully selected the essential belongings that would fit in my suitcase and tote bag, focusing on irreplaceable items and practical necessities. As I worked methodically through these tasks, I felt a strange sense of peace replacing the anxiety that had been my constant companion. The path forward was difficult but clear. Rather than continuing this degrading arrangement until Rebecca had extracted everything of value from me, I would reclaim my independence and dignity. I slept more soundly that night than I had in months, despite the upheaval awaiting me in the morning. Sometimes the most difficult decisions bring the greatest clarity once they're made. Gerald would have been proud of my courage, I thought as I drifted to sleep. Tomorrow would mark the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. Morning light filtered through my curtains as I awoke with purposeful clarity. Today would be the day I reclaimed my life and dignity. I dressed carefully in a comfortable traveling outfit, applied light makeup and styled my hair. These small acts of self-care felt like armor against the confrontation ahead. With methodical precision, I packed my suitcase and tote bag. Into the suitcase went essential clothing, medications, and toiletries. The tote bag held my most precious possessions: photo albums of Gerald and our early years with Rebecca, jewelry with sentimental value, and the few family heirlooms Rebecca hadn't yet repurposed. I included necessary documents secured in a manila envelope: birth certificate, social security card, insurance policies, and banking information. I left behind furniture and household items I'd purchased for Rebecca's home. The reading chair by the window, the small desk where the grandchildren had once done homework with me, the quilt I'd made for the guest room bed. These physical objects seemed to belong to another life now, one I was deliberately stepping away from. Standing in the center of the room that had been my space for 2 years, I allowed myself a moment of reflection. This was not how I had envisioned my senior years unfolding. The multi-generational family home I'd imagined sharing had been revealed as an illusion, a temporary arrangement designed to extract maximum financial benefit before discarding me. The pain of this realization was sharp but clarifying. I whispered a quiet goodbye to the space and what it had represented in my hopes. When I emerged from my room with packed bags, Rebecca was in the kitchen preparing breakfast. Her expression shifted from confusion to shock as she registered my suitcase. "What are you doing?" she demanded, spatula still in hand. "I've considered your proposal," I replied calmly, setting my bags by the front door. "And I've decided to decline." "Decline? This isn't a business negotiation, Mom. This is about your care and well-being." Her voice rose slightly. "Where exactly do you think you're going?" "I've made arrangements," I said simply. "I'm leaving this morning." Rebecca's face flushed with anger and something else. Panic, perhaps. "This is ridiculous. You're being impulsive and irrational. Where will you go? How will you manage?" "I managed my life before moving here, Rebecca. I'll manage again." The steady calm in my voice seemed to unnerve her further. "Is this about the vacation? We could discuss including you if it's that important." The transparent attempt at manipulation strengthened my resolve. "This is about recognizing that our arrangement isn't working for either of us. You see me as a financial resource, not as your mother. I see that clearly now, and I choose not to participate in that dynamic anymore." Anthony appeared in the kitchen doorway, drawn by our voices. "What's happening?" he asked, taking in my packed bags. "Mom's having some kind of breakdown," Rebecca said quickly. "She's talking about leaving." "Not talking about it. Doing it." I checked my watch. "My friend Judith will be here in about 15 minutes to help with my things." Rebecca switched tactics, her voice softening to the concerned tone she used when others might overhear. "Mom, you're not thinking clearly. Where would you even go? You don't have a house anymore. You've been contributing to our mortgage, remember? This is your home now." "About that mortgage contribution," I said, maintaining my composure. "I've consulted with a lawyer about the $75,000 down payment and the monthly contributions I've made. Since there was no written agreement specifying these as gifts rather than investments in property, I'll be pursuing appropriate compensation." Rebecca's expression hardened. "You'd sue your own daughter? After everything we've done for you?" "I hope it won't come to that," I responded honestly. "But I will protect my financial interests, just as you've been protecting yours." The sound of small footsteps on the stairs announced Mason and Lily's arrival. Their eyes widened at the scene before them, their mother's angry stance, their father's uncomfortable hovering, and their grandmother with packed bags by the door. "Grandma, are you going somewhere?" Lily asked, her voice small. I set my tote bag down and knelt to their level, ignoring Rebecca's glare. "Yes, sweetheart. I'm going to be living in my own place again. But this isn't goodbye forever. I'll still see you both." "Why can't you stay with us?" Mason asked, confusion evident in his expression. Before I could formulate an age-appropriate response, Rebecca interrupted. "Grandma thinks she needs more independence. Go finish getting ready for school now." The children lingered, sensing the tension but unable to process its source. Anthony finally stepped forward. "Come on, kids. I'll help you find your science project materials." He ushered them upstairs, pausing briefly to meet my eyes. "Eleanor, I'm sorry," he said quietly before following the children. Once they were gone, Rebecca's controlled facade crumbled completely. "This is how you repay us for taking you in? By abandoning your family? By threatening legal action? What kind of mother does that? What kind of daughter sees her widowed mother as a source of income rather than a person deserving of respect?" I countered, my voice remaining steady despite the emotion behind my words. "What kind of daughter threatens to send her mother away if she doesn't surrender her financial independence?" Rebecca flinched slightly at having her tactics named so explicitly. "You're twisting everything. We offered you a secure future."
No, Rebecca.
"You offered me controlled dependence. There's a significant difference." The doorbell rang, signaling Judith's arrival. "That's my ride." Rebecca followed me to the door, switching tactics yet again. "Mom, please. Let's talk about this rationally. You're making a huge mistake. Where will you even go? How will you afford housing with today's rental prices?" "I've been planning this longer than you realize," I said, opening the door to reveal Judith standing on the porch. "Hello, Judith. Thank you for coming." Judith, my teaching colleague of 20 years, nodded briskly. "Everything's ready at my place, Eleanor. Let me help with your bags." As Judith loaded my suitcase into her car, I turned back to Rebecca one final time. "I should thank you, actually. Your ultimatum yesterday gave me the clarity I needed. I've been conflicted about this situation for months, trying to justify your behavior because you're my daughter. But threatening to send me away if I didn't surrender my pension? That showed me exactly where I stand with you. So you're just leaving? Just like that?" Rebecca's voice wavered between anger and disbelief. "Yes. And one more thing you should know. I've instructed my bank to stop the automatic mortgage payments, effective immediately. You'll need to make other arrangements." I delivered this information calmly, without malice. Rebecca's face paled. "You can't do that. We budgeted based on your contribution. Just as I budgeted based on having a home of my own before selling it to help you buy this house," I replied. "We all make financial decisions that sometimes need adjustment." Before she could respond, the children came running down the stairs for final hugs. I embraced them tightly, memorizing the feel of their small bodies against mine, uncertain when I'd next have this opportunity. "I love you both very much," I told them, holding back tears. And that will never change, no matter where I live. Anthony stood awkwardly at the foot of the stairs. As I passed him toward the door, he spoke quietly. I should have said something sooner.
I'm sorry, Eleanor.
I nodded in acknowledgement of his apology, but noted its limitations. He had recognized the wrongness of the situation but chosen to remain passive until it was too late. Stepping out into the morning sunshine, I felt a complex mixture of emotions. Grief for the family relationship I had hoped to nurture, anxiety about the practical challenges ahead, but predominantly a profound sense of relief and liberation. I was reclaiming control of my life after months of escalating manipulation. The drive to Judith's house passed in contemplative silence. My friend understood I needed space to process the momentous step I had taken. Her comfortable guest room would be my temporary sanctuary, while I sorted out permanent housing arrangements. That first day of freedom brought a roller coaster of emotions. Sitting in Judith's sunlit kitchen with a cup of properly brewed tea, I allowed myself to fully acknowledge what I had lost. Daily presence in my grandchildren's lives, the family unit I had envisioned for my retirement years, and a substantial portion of my financial security. But I had gained something invaluable: self-determination and dignity. The constant walking on eggshells, the subtle and not-so-subtle diminishment of my personhood, the financial exploitation disguised as family care. All of these were behind me now. That evening, I called my longtime friend Grace, who had witnessed my marriage to Gerald and known Rebecca since infancy. "You've done the hardest part," she assured me after listening to my account. "Now it's about rebuilding. And you're not alone in that process." As I prepared for bed in Judith's guest room, surrounded by just my essential belongings, I realized this sparse environment felt more like home than Rebecca's house had in months. Here, I wasn't an unwelcome tenant or a financial resource to be managed. I was simply Eleanor, a woman of 68 years with agency, dignity, and the courage to start again. Sleep came more easily than it had in months, untroubled by anxiety about what new restriction or demand might greet me in the morning. Tomorrow would bring practical challenges, certainly, but it would also bring the freedom to face those challenges on my own terms, with my self-respect intact. That knowledge provided more comfort than any luxury housing arrangement ever could. The practical challenges of starting over at 68 proved substantial, but not insurmountable. After 2 weeks in Judith's guest room, I secured a small one-bedroom apartment in a senior-friendly building 15 minutes from my previous neighborhood. The monthly rent of $1,300 stretched my reduced budget, but the independence it provided was worth every penny. My new home came with basic amenities: refrigerator, stove, and dishwasher. Beyond these essentials, I needed to furnish the space from scratch. Judith and Grace organized a restart shower, with our circle of retired teachers. Each friend brought a household item: bath towels, kitchen utensils, lamps, and bedding. Their generosity reduced the immediate financial burden of establishing a new household. For furniture, I visited thrift stores and estate sales, finding quality pieces at affordable prices. A comfortable recliner for reading. A small dining table with 2 chairs. A second-hand desk for writing and organizing my finances. Each purchase was carefully considered against my limited budget, but gradually my apartment transformed from an empty space to a home reflecting my personal taste and needs. Transportation presented another challenge. I had left my 10-year-old sedan at Rebecca's house, deciding the potential conflict over ownership wasn't worth the emotional cost. Learning the public bus system became my initial solution. I studied routes and schedules, planning shopping trips and appointments around bus availability. The reduced senior fare made this economical, though the loss of spontaneous mobility required adjustment. My financial situation required careful restructuring. I met with a financial advisor specializing in senior issues, recommended by another teacher from our group. Together we created a sustainable budget based on my pension and remaining savings. After rent, utilities, food, and healthcare costs, my discretionary income was limited but adequate for a modest lifestyle. The advisor helped me establish a detailed record of my financial contributions to Rebecca's house, documenting the down payment and monthly mortgage payments. This documentation would be essential for the legal process of recovering my investment, though I still hoped to resolve the situation without formal litigation. Beyond these practical concerns, the emotional recovery proved equally challenging. I joined a support group for seniors experiencing family estrangement, held weekly at the community center near my new apartment. Hearing others' stories of manipulation and betrayal by adult children helped me understand I wasn't alone in this painful experience. Financial elder abuse within families is more common than most people realize, explained the group facilitator, a social worker named Patricia. The shame keeps many seniors silent, allowing the exploitation to continue. Speaking your truth is the first step toward healing. In these meetings, I gradually processed my complicated feelings about Rebecca, the anger at her betrayal, the guilt about whether my parenting had somehow cultivated her materialistic values, the grief for the loving mother-daughter relationship I had believed we shared. The group provided a safe space to express these emotions without judgment. Reconnecting with my former colleague Sylvia further aided my emotional recovery. We had taught English together for 20 years but drifted apart after retirement. Now we resumed our literary discussions, meeting weekly at a coffee shop midway between our homes. Sylvia's sharp wit and analytical mind helped me examine my experience with Rebecca from different perspectives, gradually replacing bitter resentment with more nuanced understanding. Your daughter's behavior says more about her values than your worth, Sylvia observed during one of our conversations. You can acknowledge the pain without letting it define your future. This insight helped me redirect my energy toward building a meaningful new chapter, rather than dwelling on past betrayals. I began reclaiming interests and hobbies that had been gradually abandoned during my time at Rebecca's house. I joined the library's senior book club, engaging in stimulating discussions about literature ranging from classics to contemporary fiction. My teacher's perspective was valued in these conversations, giving me a renewed sense of contribution and purpose. Volunteer work provided another avenue for rebuilding my identity beyond Rebecca's mother, or victim of financial abuse. 3 mornings weekly, I helped at the community center's literacy program, tutoring adults working toward GED completion. Using my teaching skills in this new context brought immense satisfaction. My neighbor Evelyn introduced herself shortly after I moved in, bringing homemade blueberry muffins and practical advice about the apartment building's quirks. At 72, she had lived independently since her divorce 15 years earlier and navigated senior resources with confidence. Our friendship developed naturally through shared meals and morning walks in the nearby park. Through Evelyn, I discovered the apartment building's social activities. Monthly potluck dinners, weekly card games, and occasional outings to local attractions. Initially, I attended these gatherings primarily to be polite, but gradually found myself enjoying the diverse community of seniors, each with unique life experiences and perspectives. The local church provided another supportive community. Though not particularly religious before, I found comfort in Sunday services and the senior fellowship group that met for lunch afterward. Pastor Michael visited when he learned about my situation, offering both spiritual guidance and practical assistance, connecting me with community resources for seniors. Faith communities can provide vital support during life transitions, he noted during our conversation. Not just spiritual comfort, but tangible help and human connection. This proved true as church members offered rides to grocery stores and medical appointments, gradually reducing my dependence on the limited bus schedule. Their practical support demonstrated that community could provide many of the benefits I had sought in family living, without the exploitation I had experienced. My health required attention during this transition period. The stress of the previous situation had elevated my blood pressure and disrupted my sleep patterns. With my doctor's guidance, I established healthier routines, regular walking, Mediterranean diet principles, and meditation practices to manage stress. These physical self-care practices complemented my emotional healing. As weeks became months, my new life took coherent shape. My apartment, though modest, became a peaceful sanctuary decorated with meaningful items and photographs. My schedule balanced structured activities with restorative solitude. My budget, while tight, provided for my essential needs while allowing small pleasures like occasional restaurant meals or movie outings with friends. Throughout this rebuilding process, the most painful aspect remained my separation from Mason and Lily. Rebecca had initially blocked all contact, returning the letters I sent them, and refusing to answer my calls. However, Anthony began facilitating occasional visits, picking up the children for errands that actually brought them to a park near my apartment. These precious visits allowed me to maintain my relationship with the grandchildren, though in a more limited form than before. I treasured these connections while navigating the complex emotions they triggered. The children's confusion about the family rupture was evident in their careful questions and occasional silences. 6 months into my independent living, I took a significant step toward financial reclamation by meeting with lawyer Daniel Goldstein, who specialized in elder law and financial recovery. After reviewing my documentation of contributions to Rebecca's house, he confirmed I had a strong case for recovering a substantial portion of my investment. What you've described constitutes both financial exploitation and breach of implied contract, Daniel explained during our consultation. The down payment and monthly contributions create an equity interest that should be legally recognized. This professional validation of my position strengthened my resolve to pursue fair compensation, not just for financial security, but as acknowledgement of the wrong that had been done. The path forward remained challenging, but I faced it with growing confidence in my resilience and resourcefulness. The legal process of recovering my financial investment in Rebecca's house began with a formal demand letter, drafted by Daniel Goldstein. This document detailed my $75,000 down payment contribution and approximately $36,000 in mortgage payments, requesting appropriate compensation for these investments. Rebecca's initial response was predictably defensive. She claimed these had been voluntary gifts without expectation of repayment, despite the absence of any gift documentation. Her lawyer proposed a nominal settlement of $15,000, characterizing it as generous, given the circumstances. Daniel advised against accepting this inadequate offer. Your contributions represent legitimate property investment, not gifts, he explained. We have strong documentation and witnesses to support your position. Rather than proceeding immediately to court, Daniel suggested mediation as a less adversarial approach that might preserve some possibility of future family reconciliation. After consulting with my support network, I agreed to this approach, hoping Rebecca might be more reasonable in a structured setting with neutral facilitation. The mediation session took place in a conference room at Daniel's office building. Seeing Rebecca for the first time since my departure 6 months earlier was emotionally challenging. She avoided eye contact initially, speaking only through her attorney. The mediator, a former family court judge named Margaret Wilson, established ground rules emphasizing respectful communication and good faith negotiation. Our goal today is finding a resolution that acknowledges everyone's legitimate interests, Margaret explained. Financial disputes between family members involve both practical and emotional dimensions. The discussions lasted nearly 6 hours, with both sides presenting documentation and arguments. Daniel methodically established the pattern of my contributions, their substantial nature relative to my total assets, and the absence of any documentation indicating these were gifts rather than investments. During an afternoon break, Rebecca unexpectedly approached me in the hallway outside the conference room. Away from the lawyers, her composure cracked slightly. I never thought it would come to this, she said, her voice lower than usual. Legal proceedings against your own daughter. I never wanted this either, I replied truthfully. I wanted to be part of a multigenerational family where everyone was respected and valued. Something in my calm response seemed to reach her. When negotiations resumed, her position softened noticeably. By day's end, we reached a settlement agreement. Rebecca would pay me $85,000, representing the down payment plus a portion of the mortgage contributions. The payment would be structured in installments over 18 months to avoid disrupting her family's finances. The settlement wasn't everything Daniel believed we might win in court, but it provided financial security while avoiding protracted litigation. More importantly, it represented formal acknowledgement that my contributions had been investments, not gifts to be exploited. This is a reasonable outcome, Daniel confirmed as we reviewed the final agreement. It provides substantial recovery without the emotional and financial costs of a trial. The first installment arrived precisely on schedule the following month, transferred directly to my new bank account. Each subsequent payment came punctually, suggesting Rebecca was honoring our agreement despite her initial resistance. This financial recovery significantly improved my situation, allowing me to purchase a reliable used car and establish a more substantial emergency fund. More challenging than the financial resolution was rebuilding my relationship with my grandchildren. For the first 3 months after my departure, Rebecca had completely blocked contact, returning my letters and gifts unopened. Anthony eventually began facilitating occasional visits, but these were initially secretive and limited to public places like the park near my apartment. The breakthrough came unexpectedly during Mason's school play. Anthony had quietly informed me of the performance, suggesting I attend but sit separately from their family. After the show, Mason spotted me in the audience and rushed over before Rebecca could intervene. "Grandma, you came." His enthusiastic hug drew attention from nearby parents, making it impossible for Rebecca to create a scene without embarrassment. "Of course I did, sweetheart. You were wonderful as Thomas Jefferson." I cherished the moment of connection, aware of Rebecca watching uncomfortably from several rows away. That public encounter seemed to shift something in Rebecca's approach. The following week, Anthony called suggesting a more formal visitation arrangement, Sunday afternoons twice monthly, with the children visiting my apartment. Rebecca wouldn't participate but had agreed not to actively prevent these visits. "She's still processing everything," Anthony explained awkwardly, "but she recognizes the children miss you." These regular visits became precious opportunities to rebuild my relationship with Mason and Lily. Initially cautious and confused about the family situation, they gradually relaxed into our established patterns of reading together, baking favorite treats, and playing board games. I was careful never to criticize Rebecca during these visits, focusing instead on positive experiences and values I wanted to share with my grandchildren. When Lily inevitably asked why I had moved out, I explained simply that adults sometimes have different ideas about how to live together, and sometimes living separately is better for everyone. "But I still love you and your brother more than anything," I assured her. "That will never change no matter where I live." Through these interactions, I hoped to model the respect and integrity that had been lacking in my relationship with their mother. While I couldn't control Rebecca's narrative about our situation, I could demonstrate consistency and unconditional love. 6 months after the settlement agreement, my new life had taken solid shape. My apartment, once bare and impersonal, now reflected my personality and interests. Bookshelves lined one wall, filled with beloved classics and new discoveries from my book club. A small writing desk position near the window had become my command center for correspondence and financial management. Plants thrived on every available surface, their care providing daily purpose and connection to living things. My social calendar had filled with meaningful activities. Monday and Wednesday mornings at the Literacy Center, helping adults improve reading skills. Thursday afternoons with the Senior Book Club at the library. Sunday services at Grace Community Church, followed by lunch with the Senior Fellowship Group. These structured activities balanced with spontaneous coffee dates with Judith or museum visits with Sylvia. Most significantly, I had secured part-time employment at Cornerstone Books, an independent bookstore 15 minutes from my apartment. Working 12 hours weekly allowed me to supplement my income while sharing my literary knowledge with customers. Owner Margaret Campbell valued my teaching background and encouraged me to develop a monthly literature discussion group that quickly became popular with local readers. "You've brought a whole new dimension to our community," Margaret commented after a particularly successful discussion of Toni Morrison's work. "Your perspective helps people see these books with fresh eyes." This professional validation, along with the modest income, contributed significantly to my sense of purpose and identity beyond family roles. I was no longer just a mother, grandmother, or victim of financial abuse. I was Eleanor Mitchell, literature enthusiast, community volunteer, and valued bookstore associate. The financial settlement from Rebecca, combined with my pension and part-time income, created sufficient stability to realize a long-deferred dream. Gerald and I had always planned to visit Italy after retirement, particularly Florence with its Renaissance art treasures. His sudden death had derailed those plans, and subsequent events had pushed the dream further into impossibility. Now, with careful budgeting and planning, I booked a 10-day guided tour of Italian cultural sites for the following spring. This concrete plan gave me something positive to anticipate and represented reclaiming aspirations that had been set aside during recent difficulties. "Gerald would be so pleased you're doing this," Grace commented when I shared my travel plans over coffee. "He always said you deserved to see the art you taught about for all those years." The journey toward healing remained ongoing. Some days still brought waves of grief for the family relationship I had hoped to enjoy in my senior years. Certain holidays and anniversaries triggered painful memories and awareness of what had been lost. The support group continued to provide space for processing these complex emotions without judgment. Yet alongside this continuing grief, genuine contentment emerged in my new circumstances. The freedom to arrange my home according to my preferences. The dignity of making my own financial decisions without scrutiny or criticism. The joy of forming friendships based on mutual respect rather than obligation. These daily pleasures gradually outweighed the lingering pain of familial betrayal. Most importantly, I had reclaimed my sense of self-worth and agency. The experience with Rebecca had temporarily shaken my confidence, making me question my judgment and value. Through the rebuilding process, I rediscovered my capabilities and boundaries. I learned that standing up for myself wasn't selfish but necessary for genuine self-respect. This hard-won wisdom became something I hope to share with others facing similar situations. 6 months after establishing my independent life, I began volunteering with a senior advocacy organization, speaking at community workshops about recognizing and responding to financial exploitation within families. These presentations allowed me to transform my painful experience into a resource for others, giving additional meaning to what I had endured. Financial abuse of seniors often goes unreported because of shame and family loyalty, I explained during these workshops. Understanding that standing up for yourself is an act of self-respect, not selfishness, can be the first step toward freedom. As I stood before these groups of seniors, sharing both practical information and personal insights, I embodied the triumph that can follow devastation. Not a perfect resolution with all relationships magically healed, but an authentic recovery that honored both the pain of betrayal and the possibility of renewal. The journey from that kitchen confrontation over my pension card to this new life had been neither simple nor painless. But standing in my own truth, surrounded by genuine supporters and meaningful activities, I recognized the unexpected gift within the crisis. The opportunity to discover my capacity for resilience and reinvention, even at 68. That knowledge was ultimately more valuable than any pension or property. It was the foundation upon which I was building this unexpected final chapter, one day at a time, with hard-won wisdom and quiet determination. Have you ever faced a difficult decision to stand up for yourself, even when it meant leaving behind something that once felt secure? I'd love to hear your stories and perspectives in the comments below. Remember that your experience might help someone else find the courage they need. If this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with others who might need this message of resilience and self-respect. Thank you for joining me today. And remember that it's never too late to begin again with dignity and hope.